What if I told you that some of the most misunderstood behaviors, things like over-explaining, flinching when someone raises their voice, or laughing at painful memories, aren't signs of weakness, but of survival? What if I told you that someone you love, maybe even you yourself, might be carrying invisible scars that show up in strange, confusing ways, and that these so-called quirks are actually trauma codes left behind by narcissistic abuse? Because the truth is, survivors of narcissistic abuse don't always look like survivors. They've learned to hide the damage, to smile while breaking, to apologize when they're the ones bleeding. And in today's video, I am going to reveal 10 strange, easily misunderstood behaviors that narcissistic abuse survivors often carry with them long after the abuse has ended. These aren't random behaviors either. They're patterned, predictable, and once you understand them, you'll never see yourself or someone you love the same way again. But first, if you're new to this channel, I'd like to take a moment and welcome you and invite you to please subscribe and be sure and hit that notification bell because I put out new videos every week. Also, if you are interested in private one-on-one narcissistic abuse recovery coaching with me, please visit my website. It's linked in the description below. So today we're talking about some of the strange and bizarre behaviors that a survivor of narcissistic abuse may exhibit. When someone is severely traumatized repetitively over a long period of time, the brain and the nervous system adapt to this environment based on survival, not logic. And these behaviors may seem irrational to someone on the outside looking in. And honestly, many times they are not understood, nor do they make sense to the survivor either. These behaviors weren't created through conscious choice. They were built in chaos, wired into the nervous system for one purpose and one purpose only, to stay safe. And the first strange behavior that is very common in survivors of narcissistic abuse is over-apologizing for everything. We have been programmed to apologize even when we have done nothing wrong. Why, you ask? Because that word once was able to keep us safe on occasion. That word helped keep the peace in our past and sometimes would buy us a few seconds of safety. We have been blamed for things relentlessly in the years we were subjected to our abuser, regardless of whether or not we were truly the responsible party. We have been conditioned to immediately accept accountability for anything that goes wrong or might have upset our abuser, because had we attempted to disagree or defend ourselves, things would have taken a turn for the worse for us. So it became easier and certainly safer to just immediately apologize, regardless of the facts. When you're living in a home with a narcissistic abuser, the goal is safety and survival, not who is right and who is wrong. Those things are meaningless to a narcissist. Next, survivors of narcissistic abuse will usually have extreme difficulty making decisions, even very simple and basic decisions. What you have to understand is confidence in decision making requires a sense of self-trust and internal stability, two things that are systematically dismantled in narcissistic abuse. Survivors often become dependent on external validation because they've been trained to believe their own preferences are wrong, selfish, stupid, or even dangerous. So what may look like indecision to you is often the aftermath of chronic invalidation, criticism, and judgment. Survivors have been ridiculed, humiliated, degraded, and disparaged for the decisions they have made, big or small, for the duration of their relationship with their abuser. And it didn't matter if the decision we made didn't end badly or have any negative consequences. The narcissist will find a way to make the decision we made bad in some way. For example, let's say you cooked a Mexican dish for dinner on a Wednesday night. and the narcissist just happens to be in a terrible mood or suffered some kind of a narcissistic injury during the day out in the real world, and now needs to abuse and degrade you in order to feel better and emotionally regulate themselves. Now, this Mexican dinner you just made is in the narcissist crosshairs, and you are confronted with statements like, "What kind of an idiot would cook Mexican on a Wednesday night? You ignorant fool. Everyone knows you only eat Mexican food on the weekends and that Wednesdays are reserved for Italian. And everybody knows that but your stupid ass. Way to ruin everyone's day." Encounters like that for a survivor of narcissistic abuse are very common. And if you are subjected to this type of abuse based on your choice of Mexican food over Italian, you can see how it would become very intimidating and very scary to make decisions, even about something as inconsequential as what to eat for dinner on a Wednesday night. Next, survivors of narcissistic abuse will usually feel a great deal of guilt when they are resting or trying to relax. Survivors were taught that their value is tied to what they can accomplish or how well they are serving the narcissist's needs. In toxic environments, resting isn't seen as self-care. It's framed as laziness, selfishness, or some kind of moral failing. And over time, their nervous system learned to associate relaxation with danger, because slowing down meant they were vulnerable to criticism, punishment, or guilt tripping. So even now, when the danger is gone, the guilt unfortunately remains. Next, survivors of narcissistic abuse will struggle to accept kindness without suspicion. To a survivor, kindness feels like a trick door. Narcissistic abuse trains the brain to equate kindness with manipulation, because when we were with our narcissistic abuser, kindness was a strategy used to disarm, confuse, or create dependency. And unfortunately, as a result, when someone shows us authentic care or support, our nervous system doesn't interpret it as comfort. It registers it as danger. The kindness feels unfamiliar, and the unfamiliar has never felt safe. Understand, however, it's not because the survivor doesn't want to be in relationships that are loving and kind, because we do. However, historically, when we were treated this way, it was always a trap. And that has left a blueprint in our subconscious mind that associates kindness with deception. Next, survivors of narcissistic abuse will have a very difficult time accepting compliments, and typically that will trigger us to freeze. And that's hard for a lot of people to understand, because to most people, a compliment feels good. However, to a survivor, it can feel dangerous. Praise was often used as a setup, offered just before the rug was pulled out from underneath us, or it came with an agenda, a transaction, or a manipulation. So when someone offers a sincere compliment now, we freeze. It stops us dead in our tracks, not because we are shy or bashful, but because we are scanning the situation for the catch, for the setup, for the trickery. When you are living in a narcissistically abusive environment, nothing was as it seems. Anything and everything that could be used to manipulate or exploit us was. And unfortunately, deconstructing these beliefs is a long process. It does not happen overnight. Next, survivors of narcissistic abuse may laugh when talking about painful things. However, that laugh you hear, it's not joy or coming from a place where we actually believe this is funny. It's a smokescreen. It's a survivor's way of wrapping the horror of what we have lived through in humor, so that the world doesn't see the depth of pain and despair we feel. In homes ruled by narcissists, vulnerability was very dangerous. So we learned to package our pain as a punchline. If we can make it sound light, maybe it wouldn't hurt so much. Maybe we would be allowed to tell our story without being punished for feeling it. Plus, laughing creates a protective distance from the pain, offering just enough space to tell the truth without fully feeling or disclosing the impact. Next, and this is a big one, survivors of narcissistic abuse will usually obsessively explain ourselves. What you have to understand is that survivors of narcissistic abuse have been gaslit to believe our reality is wrong and our intentions are malicious. Every single move we made was judged and ridiculed, and our explanations for why we did something were never good enough. No matter what we did, it was condemned. Over time, we develop a compulsive need to overcommunicate, to anticipate criticism, and to hopefully prevent any misinterpretation. So we obsessively explain ourselves in hopes of staying one step ahead of an attack. It's a trauma response, a trauma-driven strategy to avoid being punished for things we didn't even do. And finally, survivors of narcissistic abuse will constantly seek reassurance from other people, but then not believe it when it's given. We ask for reassurance like it's a life raft, and when you throw it to us, we still can't grab on. And it's not because we don't want to, it's because we were taught that safety was always followed by sabotage, that love meant control, and comfort was just the calm before the next storm. We don't necessarily doubt you, but rather live in a state of doubt as to whether safety exists at all. Anytime we have felt safe, it was only a very brief and passing moment, never a feeling that had any lasting duration or security. Okay, that's going to do it for today's video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. Also, follow me on my other social media platforms. The links are in the description below. Thanks for watching, everyone.